discussing Taharas HaMishpacha. We have discussed it for 4 shiurim. This is the 5th shiur in this thing. Obviously, we'll never be able to do justice to it, but we are just touching some of the highlights. As you recall, it is a that a Jewish couple cannot live together unless the wife follows the laws of Taharas HaMishpacha. That is, that she's required to wait a minimum of 5 days, discovers the bleeding or the staining of the beginning of her vessus, of her period. So, for the first 5 days, she's got to wait regardless. If she bled only the first day, she still has to wait 5 days. And the reason for all this waiting is that because of there is a chashash that perhaps that she had intercourse with her husband the day before the beginning of the vessus, and we want the sperm to have enough time to no longer be capable of impregnating the woman, which is a period of, as we mentioned before, a period of 72 hours, which is 3 days. So we have, besides the days there, 3 more days. So in an emergency situation, if there are some extenuating circumstances, sometimes Rav can give a heter to start counting at the end of 4 days. But we usually are annoyed to wait at least 5 days once she is a married woman. Yes.
If they didn't have relations for, say, 4 days before
no problem. There's no change in the halacha regardless whether she had sexual intercourse or not, but this is the basic reason. Once you understand that the basic reason is to give for the period of time, we have a general rule. The Gemara discusses it and brought in the poskim, and here's the posik. I am learning with you Hilchas Nida, a very beautiful sefer. I commend you all to get a copy for your own self, written by Rabbi Shimon the Eider 5 years ago. Hilchas Nida, the first section, it talks about how a woman is supposed to prepare and get out of the period of being a nida and becoming tor so that she can go and resume a sexual relationship with her husband. Because of the fact that we mentioned that the deeper purpose, besides the fact that the actual bleeding, the fact is we have to have enough time for the Chazal tell us that it takes 3 days. After 3 days, the sperm of the husband is not capable of impregnating the ova of the female. And so therefore, we have to wait that amount of time. From the ejection from the husband, and it's in the womb. If she hasn't become impregnated within 3 days, she will not come impregnated from that sexual intercourse. So the requirement for the 5-day waiting period is because of this concept. It takes at least 3 days for this Vazera not to be capable of impregnating the female. But we have altogether 5 days that we have to wait. 2 days back down because we're talking about obviously, if say for instance, yes. No, go ahead. That's beside the point, but this is the reason why we have that 5 days. The difference is this. Once they are annoyed to have a 5th day, and it's been a custom that we have accepted it. As I mentioned to you, if there was an emergency situation, a Rav could give a heter, God forbid, the woman has irregular heter to only count 4 days, and then count the 7 days after she makes after Tara, where she goes thoroughly and examines herself thoroughly after the end of the flow. Only if there is an emergency situation and she had consult a Rav. No way, no. Unless there is an exceptional circumstance, 5 days is the very minimal.
She can't decide the
She can't make a decision. She has to go through a Rav, a Yerei Shamayim, a Ben Torah, Orthodox rabbi. I just to mention to you, if she had, unfortunately, she was bleeding all over the place. There could be other circumstances if she had all kinds of things. The important thing is that we are not interested in prohibiting a woman from living with her husband. What we are interested is in making it permissible for her to live with her husband as much as we can. And if you go to any Rav that's worthy of the name, he will seek a heter if it's necessary in her circumstances. But there are all kinds of circumstances and all kinds of women. And unless there is a definite need for the heter will not be given. You understand? It's not that any woman can come and just cut off one day. It's just the way it is. Now, so once we make an established way we do it, we do not go and change our minog. We have a minog that there's a possibility she may have had a sexual intercourse between the days. She might have thought it was the day before on twilight. Bein hashmoshes, they call it. And she may have thought it really is the day before, when really it may, in fact, be after nightfall and already the next day. So therefore, in order to, regardless of that, we don't make any differentiation. Once we establish I understand, it starts from nightfall, the new day. But the important thing is that we don't change minhagim.
The day starts at night.
The day starts at night, yes.
What I'm saying is that
once her period starts, it will certainly last as long as the flow. If she was bleeding for a whole week, it still lasts. In other words, a minimum of 5 days of a waiting period, but at least a minimal of 5 days, and it could be more, God forbid. But it could be. Sometimes a woman has a period lasts longer. Several times during our marriage, my wife had periods even longer than 5 days. That happens. Now, what's your shot? You just keep on. You don't make a hefsetaro. There's no cleansing. There's no thorough examination of the woman until the period is definitely ended.
It's ridiculous to do it if the period hasn't ended yet.
leads to real long.
You go to a doctor. She's a sick woman. Ordinary. We're not talking about the exceptions. There could be a woman, God forbid, that's bleeding all the time, and there's a shaila where you can marry such a woman or live with her. You understand? We're not talking about that. God protects us against such a situation occurring. I understand that there's sick people. Unfortunately, I'm not. It's just the way it is. When a woman loses a period, she waits 5 days, then she examines herself for 7 days, and then she goes to the mikveh. Yes, but she's got to lose her period 3 times in a row. And then and she's got to be at a time of her life when it's possible. It also has to do with having her period as well. But we're worried about, we're worried about the sperm giving this at least 72 hours. This is the reasons that are given here.
Well, the question is, if she has a period, then of course that's why she's a dita. The only question is, how long is the minimum before she can make a hefsetara, before she can go and examine herself? That's the question.
Right.
How do you know how long? Some women have 5-day periods, some women can have a 4-day period, a 6-day period. It varies.
Yeah, that's right.
So then, therefore, the rabbis have to came up with a minimum, so that if a woman does have a short period, she wouldn't have to wait an extraordinary long amount of time before she can go and do a hefsetara and start getting on with things.
You understand?
But there has to be the minimum.
Is there any difficulty with that understanding? First, we had the first 5 days. You understand those? The first 5 days is the 5 days the waiting period. You're waiting until the bleeding is stopped, or you're waiting until the 5 days has elapsed. Okay. Now, you come even if the husband is out of town, a woman is still supposed to follow, has no relationship between a period prior to the beginning of her period. She still has to go and wait these 5 days before she comes, because we have a general rule, low pollution. We don't make any exceptions to the general rule. In other words, we have a general rule because a husband can be out of town, he can be in Los Angeles, and they live in Chicago, and he can take an airplane, he can be home in a few hours. No big deal. Nowadays, with the modern transportation the way it is, it's not unusual that the husband could be wake up in Los Angeles in the morning and be in Chicago at noon.
It doesn't take you 2 hours to get. It doesn't take you at least 4 hours to get home by cab.
Sorry, but he'll be home by nighttime, so no problem. That happens quite often. There are a lot of people that travel like that on a steady basis. Now, there are examples. So we say like that. Let's say everything is stopped at the end of the 4th day. Sometimes, in an emergency situation, they permit 4 days to be a minimum of the waiting period. But usually, the minimal is 5 days waiting period. And since it's been in effect for many hundreds of years already, and this minog is considered a major violation if somebody violates this period. All right, once she's got that, she's true with that, the bleeding is stopped and everything, you don't have to repeat it another 5 days. In other words, say for instance, she's made the hefsetara, and she has examined herself thoroughly. We discussed earlier how to make the hefsetara in an earlier section, She has a piece of soft cloth that she inserts into her vagina, and she examines herself as far as her finger can go, as far as and she does the best she can to examine all the crevices and things all over everything, and she cleans herself very thoroughly as best she can. And once that has ended,
She has to examine the cloth.
she has to examine the cloth out. And we discussed the colors that are prohibited and the colors that are permissible and everything. And of course, if there are special problems because of pregnancy or other things like that, there's exceptions to the general rule. You understand? Or ovulation problems that could prevent permanent becoming pregnant or something, there you have to discuss with her. Or if, God forbid, she has a period twice monthly and therefore could, God forbid, never be able to live with her husband, and there again, you have to discuss it with her or whether she can marry, God forbid. Yeah, different minogam. Anyway, no, please, we're not going to discuss this at this time. I want to just, I want to discuss these laws. I want to get them on the thing. Now, according to, most poskim hold that if a bride prior to her wedding is not required to wait all 5 days. As soon as her period is stopped, the bleeding is stopped, she may make a hefset and then count to 7 days. Many are accustomed to wait at least 4 days prior to this, at least 4-day move.
With all this, he says?
He says many folks can say that. Because she's never presumably left with her husband prior to this time. So there's no shiloh about that. Yes? Good. We're not there yet. She's not gone to bed with her husband. She's wait a little while before that period. When we come to that, we'll discuss that. There is a shiloh there, whether he's supposed to prematurely withdraw from her. Because there's a big Easter involved. If prematurely he withdraws from her, there is a prohibition. You must understand something. The ma'aseh, the action of having sex with one's wife, is considered by Chazal as a very holy action. It is a great, and it's friends with tremendous degree of holiness. It must be treated as an act of a mitzvah. It must be treated as a mitzvah, not, God forbid, as anything other than of a very holy. It's a very holy thing. Through this intercourse could come the Melech HaMashiach. All the righteous people come from this act. We have a mimer that tells us that God, the Rabbinic, is examining these intercourses and waiting, when will these tzaddikim come into the world? And these righteous people come into the world. The Rabbinic is interested in these intercourses to occur. There is no way in the world that we, as Rabbonim and as Jews, are trying to go and make life difficult for anybody. We're trying to make it be done in a spirit of holiness. We must consider this as one of the most holiest activities that a husband and wife can engage in. And it must be done in a very proper way, according to the halacha, in order, God forbid, that you shouldn't go and make a blemish on your family relationships or a blemish on your children. And this is something that is very necessary, one of the foundations of Yiddishkeit. A person cannot be a religious Jew particular about Taharas, purity of family relationship. It's one of the foundations of Judaism. And don't let anybody tell you different. Now let's continue. After she has made this hefset Tahara, and she starts, and she has examined herself thoroughly, and there's no question about it, everything is all right. Fine, good. Then and that there are no, unless a woman has difficulty or pain, that she stops a tampon or something of that nature, making it there in her vagina after hefset Tahara during the twilight of after the 5 days. That's approximately an hour. Some say it's up to 50 minutes. Others say it's up to 72 minutes. It's called both in most cases where there's a lot of there's tissue that you put, a woman inserts. Yes. After the 5 days, after she's examined herself thoroughly with the dika cloth, hefset Tahara is the cleansing her, that she now is beginning to get ready to count the 7 clean days.
It's like an interruption between the period, between the 5 days and the 7 days.
Yes. Yes.
Wow.
She is considered a nido.
What are you saying? Something different.
What's your question?
So I was just going to, after the period is stopped, there's no flow anymore. The flow is gone. If there's a flow, there's no point in making the hefsek tahara. It's not going to work. Right? Now then she has to go clean herself, because you don't want any of the, if there's any blood still remaining on the outside, you don't want that to get onto the cloth that you're going to go examine, because you don't want to get involved in that kind of a question. So you have to the woman has to wash herself thoroughly in order to make sure there's no blood on the surrounding outside. Then, what he's saying is, you can use some kind of a white, you said a tampon, it could be just a white cloth, any kind of a white cloth that she can insert.
It says that dochik is literally a tight-fitting piece of cotton or something else of this nature. Examination. A tampon may also be used. So you have, and it should be kept inside until nightfall, which is determined by the appearance of treats. Just like, for instance, you wait on Motzi Shabbos. You wait until there's nightfall before you daven. The sun goes out. There are many that hold that it should be 72 minutes. There are others that said that it could be 50 minutes after sunset. And
you have to use a white cloth, okay?
So you can examine the colors. Yes.
It's got to be something that's going to more hurt, and it's something that it's feasible that this can be the white kind of a cloth.
If the dochik would cause undue pain or discomfort, this tight-fitting piece of cloth or a discomfort, and then you have to consult the Rav, and he can give a heter that, but that's not a thing, because it's something, it's considered it's an emergency situation, if you will. It's considered an emergency situation. It's called a situation.
When does she check the cloth? Because it's dark by the time you take it out. When does she check it?
Well, she can check it in the morning.
But can't it cause showers from that time? No. If you keep something over, dust particles and anything can get to it.
Again,
the point of matter is the closer the time you do it, the time you look at it, the better thing to do.
Yes.
Sunlight.
Now we've had this examination, and everything, thanks God, is working out all right. At that time, she's required to change to clean, free check pajamas or whatever she's wearing. And when she lies in bed, she's to have a clean, pre-checked sheet spread on her bed. And, if she doesn't have it's preferable so you can discern if there's any bleeding. You got a red sheet, you're never going to, how are you going to know if there's going to be bleeding or not? If you have a white sheet, you can see it. It's better that it would be that way. Yeah, you see, the man and woman are not sleeping in the same bed until she is permitted to go and have sex with him. You understand that? Well, if she's wearing tight-fitting white undergarments, then it would not necessarily be all right. It would be all right, even though you can hold that you don't need a white sheet on the bed. In other words, a tight-fitting undergarment, because that's on the undergarment. But you've got to have something that you can see it. Okay, let's go. For all 7 days, the 7 clean days, that now we're going to count, you've got to have these white garments so that you do the best you can on it. Okay, fine. Now, you counting the 7 days. All right, let's go. Say, for instance, you start counting. What are you supposed to do? You make an examination in the morning. Right. All right, fine, good. Now, the 7 clean days must be complete and consecutive days. You can't have one day clean and then next day bleeding and the next day clean and next day bleeding. It's got to be 7 complete consecutive days. Days of 24 hours duration, starting at nightfall of the day before. That starts the day until all of the next day. That is considered 1 day. You understand that? Beginning of the evening, you start counting 7 days. Now, when do you examine yourself during the 7 days? She's required, some say that it's better to count the days, so you'll be, today is the first day, like something like counting the Omer. Today is the first day of the Omer. If she just thinks about it, it'll be all right too. And you can do this in English, any language that you understand, because you might forget. You don't have to make a brook. Most folks can say, no, you don't have to count at all. But some say you can if you wish to, and they recommend it. Of course, another way of doing it is to write it down. So you have to, there were other things there. They used to have a ziva and a nida. Since the time we no longer have these differentiations. Anytime a woman is bleeding, we accept it as though it is nida. We don't make a differentiation. But the 5 days and the 7 days are halachic. They are halacha. Now let's go further. When she examines herself, she thinks, all right, fine. She must remain that she has to count 7 days for herself. In other words, she's got to count them. She's got to consider herself. All right, now that's the 7 clean days until the bleeding has stopped.
Up to 3 days.
You still can't have to say that.
If it goes longer than 5 days, you go as long as it goes.
It goes long as it gets a minimum. A maximum means it can go as many days as she bleeds. Okay? All right, fine. Good. All right. Now, let's say, for instance, a scenario. The first clean day, and Baruch Hashem, no bleeding. Everything is going to fade to Bas. Since the second day, she examines herself. She examines herself twice a day, in the early morning and the late afternoon, by natural sunlight, twice a day, and each time she examines herself in the way that's followed throughout the entire 7 days. But if she didn't, as long as she examined herself one time in the early morning of the first day, and in the late afternoon, in the 7th day, and if for any reason she made anything less than a proper examination any time in the interim time, she still will be considered proper, and she can go to the mikvah at the end of the 7 days. You understand? But of course, for a woman that is zealous and trying to do it, she tries to do it every day correctly. Now we'll see. It's much better that she do it every day correctly. Like I'll explain you a scenario. For instance, let's say she started counting 1 day, one Torah day, and like I say, Baruch Hashem, no bleeding, nothing, no shilas at all. The second day, she had a spot, and it was a red spot. There's no shilah that this was some from the Makor. And so what is now? Do we say that because she had a bleeding now, the second of the clean days, that she has to wait another 5 days? No, we don't say that. Remember, the important reason she had to wait the 5 days is because the discharge of the sperm of the husband. She hadn't lived with her husband now for 6 or 7 days already. So we don't, if once she has this, say for instance she discovered on the morning of the second day the spotting, that disrupts the counting of the 7 days. That first day is sort of lost. You can't connect it because it's been an inter. What she does later in that day, she examines herself to see if she has stopped. And if it just was a drop, it happens. She can examine herself, and later in that day, she makes another examination. She finds out, Baruch Hashem, it's clean already again. And she makes the proper examination. So that day there could be considered like the Hafsataro, and then the day will be the first day again of the 7 days. She can count 7 days, starting with the 3rd day, and the 7 days, and then at the end of the 7 days, she cleanses herself, examines herself, to go and pebble.
In other words, if she does the examination and there's something on it, the count again, she can't just say, okay.
If she has a shaila, and she doesn't understand the color, whether or not it is considered an improper color or not, she should go that has experience in this area. And he's got to be Torah experience in this area, and consult with it, and need not have any false modesty. Something that this is a holy action. It is not to be considered, God forbid, profane. Laugh about sex as though it's something that's supposed to be hidden in a closet and something to be ashamed of. This is a very holy action. To here comes out the future generations of Jews who will serve God. And if it is very important to God, then it's got to be very important to us. And don't, God forbid, imagine that this is something less than something very important and something that's worthy of the greatest righteous type. And if a person engages in this in a proper way, God blesses him and his children. You understand? So we go further. Let's say, Baruch Hashem, she's examined herself during the 7 clean days. During that time, she can swim and everything. It's got nothing to do with her other activities. She just has to make these examinations. She performs her morning examination. Then if she wants to wash herself out there, douching, we call it, she can do it. But first examine herself, and then deducing after the examination. Now, you don't have to. Some women like to. Some, unfortunately, are not so
supporting either way. Whatever a woman does, she does. He's not endorsing any one way of living.
First, take the pre-check examination cloth, and she is index finger inserts it into her vagina and penetrating as deeply as possible, and then it moved around slowly and thoroughly from top to bottom in a circular motion. And she's supposed to search out all the crevices and folds to ensure all bleeding and staining have completely ceased. She does this, and sometimes, God forbid, she may forget once during the 7 days, or twice, or 3 times. As long as the minimum is up to 5 days in a waiting period, and then the minimum is the first one on the first day in the morning, and the late afternoon of the 7th day. We'll do much more, yes. In such circumstances, it usually is considered proper. It's better to do it the other way, because you did it on the first day and the 7th day. But if you miss the 7th day, you haven't got, no.
You don't have a full spectrum light.
If you don't do it on the 7th day, you haven't got 7 full days. You've got to have 7 full days. And there are some people, unfortunately, are not knowledgeable about this, and they try to go, if you haven't got 7 full days, you have not got it all. The whole thing has to be done. And we catch it fast enough, we say, you still have to examine yourself tomorrow. 5 and 7? Is that such a beyond your capacity?
At the mixer, they don't bother with what
They evaluate whether or not she's 12, she's pared her nails, they can see if you've got long nails. Huh? No, they determine whether or not she makes a proper immersion.
See, if there's anything in the body that can be removed, it's supposed to be removed, remove it. If there's a hair on her back, she can't see it. She don't know if there's a hair, but that's a chatzitza. That's going to be something that's going to stop her from having a proper on her back, and she can't see it. There's something that she can't see.
That's what she usually takes a shower before she goes in the if she's got something that stops the water from touching all the areas, so women will go to use the mix. After the 7 clean days, everything is fine, Baruch Hashem. 18 clean days must be made during the daytime. All right, now fine. Now, after, just Sunday, after she goes to the mikveh, she has to immerse, and then what she should wear, that she is not a menstrual, and she is living with her husband, sexually.
We will now begin Taharas HaMishpacha, the laws of family purity, session number 6.
Of the thing. But if you do it intentionally, it's here for us. Person dies, and also, unfortunately, it also affects future generations. If children are born, the mother is, and so therefore we have to be very careful, observant. Yes. We mentioned this before in the morning. You will have sons that are outstanding Talmidei Chachamim, and you will also be blessed with a long life. And we start out by saying if a woman experiences any kind of bleeding from her uterus, regardless of how little it is, she's considered a needle. And even if there's no other immersion during her normal menstrual period, she's considered a needle, and she starts out about the 5 unclean days. So if the source of bleeding is from a different source, from a wound or some other source, then of course she may not. All right. Now, if she did not, but she found a stain on her body or undergarments, if she cannot, and something else, she may be considered a needle. Now, in regards to stains, that's why I wanted to discuss it here. We have discussed before the colors that could render her a needle. If she discovers a black or a red color, or darker hue or shade, unless it's encrypted other causes, she's considered a needle. If she discovers white, blue, green or pale yellow discharges or stains, he's not considered a needle. And then sometimes the stain which is red or black may be something else. It may come from, as we mentioned before, a thread or lint or lipstick or nail polish, off dirt or the light, things of that nature. If there's any questions, of course, you should show the stain to the row. There is determination, and of course there are, since the blood inside the woman's body mixes with other secretions and enzymes, and of exposure to air may appear in different hues and shades, certain other colors, aside from red and black, are questionable. These we've mentioned before: brown, dark yellow, pale pink. And so we have many of these factors here. And now, if a woman feels, examines herself immediately, and if she discovers a white discharge or one of the colors that do not render her a needle, she is in fact not a needle. The stain, even if very small, she's considered a needle. And the questionable ones, of course, are questionable. We're now going to talk about define a stain on an undergarment. We have 4 conditions have to be leading up to. 4 conditions have to be fulfilled. If any one of these 4 conditions are not fulfilled, she may not be considered a nida. First of all, the stain must cover an area larger than a grease. Now, what's a grease? It's some kind of a legume of an area equal to that of a United States penny. That's 19 millimeters in diameter. It can be a square, a rectangle, or even in order to make a person considered a nida, she has to have 4 conditions fulfilled. The first one is the stain must cover an area. She didn't feel any menstrual flow. There was no opening or anything. In other words, there was nothing to indicate to her that her period had started. She saw a stain. Now, the stain has to be larger than a grease, and a grease is a legume of the area equal to that of a United States penny. 19 millimeters in diameter.
How did they come up with that stuff?
That's what I'm reading from Hilchos Nida from Rabbi Heider. Rabbi Miller in his 28th revised edition also says that same measurement. This is a double thing that's established.
If you had something smaller, it still would not be considered.
No, but this is what the Rabbi Miller says on page 170 of his Secret of the Jew revised edition. On page 170. In case there are several, it says like this: when a woman finds a stain, even without having perceived any bleeding on any part of her body, in such a place where it may be assumed that it came from her womb, or on her undergarments from the waist downwards, or on the end of her sleeves, or on her, and the stain is of a reddish or blackish color, and that stain is equivalent in size to a cent piece, that is 3/4 of an inch, United States standard, in diameter, the woman is a nida. If it is smaller, she is not a nida. In case there are several small stains, and not one of them is the size of a cent piece when separated from each other, if they're separate from each other, she's not a nida. When the small stains are connected, and when taken together as a whole, the shape of the stain does not make any difference. It is not required to make an exact, accurate measurement. A fair estimate is sufficient. Yeah, well, whatever it is, but this is what he says. All right. All right, now, what's your salary?
If she felt it, okay?
Well, this doesn't apply then. We're talking
then
about
this wouldn't apply.
No,
only if she just found it without feeling anything.
Didn't feel it. Okay? And this happens. This does happen from time to time. Yes, Anita. We're talking about where she wasn't Anita. If there is a different child. Over there, she has chazaka, she has a presumption that she's pure.
Or larger, I don't know.
We'll discuss that. But right now I want to discuss where she feels no discharge. But we're dealing in a different scenario. One case is talking where she has a chazaka, she's still a nida. In the other case, where's the husband? Okay? You understand that? First point. All right, second, it's found on white material. Therefore, it is proper for a Jewish married woman to wear undergarments during the days that she's torah. Because if she finds a stain and it's less than the size of a grease, less than the size of a United States penny, a beged savua, a colored garment, it does not render her a nida. Most poskim hold that this law applies even if the stain is found in the garment that's direct contact with her body. That's what the Rabbi
as long as it's colored,
yes.
Then even if it's bigger than a penny, it wouldn't render her a nida.
He just says there, first of all, it should not be that size. And he's got to have 4 conditions in order to make her a nida.
Yes.
One is if it's of that size.
Okay, I look at a colored cloth, then it would work.
Yes, that's right.
If it's a colored, if it's
That's right. That's right.
theoretically.
That's right. That's the way he's saying it here. We're not disguising. We're trying to go and make a woman principle to live with her husband. The whole idea here is we're trying to go and make that women and Jewish men to the time the mitzvah fool. Yes.
Okay, you answered it before. It's not playing games or anything. The whole trick is that she has a presumption that she's Torah. She's permitted to her husband. Okay, she had already gone through the mitzvah, and now she's permitted. So she has that to Gedola Chazaka.
That's right.
It's very strong when you have a track record of something, a previous track record, and therefore you have that to back you up, positive evidence that'll back it up that since you have this track record. So since she has this track record, we give this leniency is that we try not to make it easy for her to be considered thereafter a nida, because if in fact frequency should never be permitted to her husband.
You can box out every woman from marrying everyone helps the situation, certainly. So it's good to know. If you can reduce the shiloh, you remember, like, for instance, something on the stove, you remove it fast, before the heat can affect it, it reduces the shaila in the question of the kosher. You understand? That's right. To remove that portion of the shaila, yes.
First of all, she already had her period.
Yeah, we're trying to go and permit a Jewish woman to marry, to live with her husband. We're not trying to make her life a finster.
Since she already had her period, it's wounds that we don't know about it. So you
Yeah,
already,
that's right.
So this way, we're lessening the suffix on the suffix.
That's right. We're making it more and more doubtful that it could have been from the womb. We're trying to go and eliminate as much as possible the shaila. If you be a maid, you can drive yourself from sugar. You'll never be able to live with your wife. We're not trying to do that. Yes, she is now Torah to render her. We haven't mentioned. I'm still on the second one. The reason why I wanted to discuss it today because it's very important.
Okay, so one is it has to be the size of a penny.
It's got to be at least the size of a penny or bigger
in order to be considered a stain.
That's a stain that could make her a nida.
And then the next thing is...
And then the stain was found on white material.
Yeah.
I suggest again, any of you should get this either. It was published 5 years ago. It's a very beautiful book. He's got not only the top, he's got all the sources that's backing up his position. So he's not just saying words. He's got authority for everything he said.
Are those representative of actually the size?
Yeah.
That's actually...
There's an exercise there. Have a pen.
I have a question. Now, during question...
You won't have to come to the figure out.
You can't do it on Shabbos days. Okay, can I ask you Shabbos? Okay, rarely do you are there stains that are perfect circles, perfect squares, and perfect triangles?
Remember, Rabbi Miller says doesn't mean it's as long as...
But say you have, it's like a weird configuration where you have, whatever it is, part of it's meeting, like it ran or something, part that ran and it goes, and it's touching. As long as it's touching,
yeah.
And in every position it is touching, you then go by
the side. You
start the whole thing, if it's all touching.
If it's touching, yes. Yeah, no. See, that's what Rabbi Miller says. See, that's... When you learn this, you have to learn from another. One gives you one thing, another gives you another thing, and then you got to put them together. That's what we're doing now. Now he says this halacha that if the stain is found on white material, a beged loban, a white garment, then this should become a need if other conditions are found. But if it's on a colored garment, like it's a buah, it doesn't render a nida. And then he says this halacha. What if the stain is found on a colored garment, doesn't render a nida, only applies if the stain is found on a colored portion of the garment. But what if the garment contains white spaces, or was bleached or faded, and the stain appears on a white space, then a Rav should be consulted to see what...
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, well then, yeah. No, but we're not trying to go and put a Jewish wife and living with her husband. We're trying to make it a hector. If you take the proper precautions, you minimize the amount of time that she has to be separated from her husband. And it's perfectly all right to do. For this reason, it's advised for women to wear colored undergarments, not white ones, and to use colored sheets on her bed during the days when she's permissible to her husband. But again, during the 7 clean days when she's examining herself, there she's required to wear white undergarments and use white sheets on her bed, because there still she has cheskes nido. She hasn't got a cheskes